Gadol Elohai.
Hello everyone, and welcome once again to Hitting the Mark. This is Mike Conley, and I am going to be sharing with you this week from the Torah once again. We're going to be looking at 1 Samuel. Last week, I shared many verses from the Torah and the Messianic Scriptures with you. The issue becomes, in our day, when everything is relative, one day truth is this and the next day truth is something else, can the Tanakh or the Old Testament be truly relevant to our day? I want to share with you one of the many ways that the Tanakh or the Old Testament is truly relevant to our time and future time. So let's take a look at 1 Samuel chapter 15. Samuel said unto Saul, "The Lord sent me to anoint you to be king over his people, over Israel. Now therefore, hearken thou unto the voice of the words of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel, how he laid wait for him in the way when he came up from Egypt." Verse 3, "Now go and smite Amalek, and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and donkey." And Saul gathered the people together and numbered them in Telalim. There were 200,000 footmen and 10,000 men of Judah. And Saul came to a city of Amalek and laid it waste in the valley where they fought. And Saul said to the Kenites, "I want you to depart, get down from among the Amalekites, or I will destroy you with them. For you were kind to all the children of Israel when they came up out of Egypt." So the Kenites left and departed from among the Amalekites. And Saul fought the Amalekites from Havilah until you came to Shur, that is over against Egypt. In verse 8, he took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. But Saul and the people spared Agag, and the best of the sheep, and of the oxen, and of the fatlings, and the lambs, and all that was good, and would not utterly destroy them. But everything that was vile and refuse, that they destroyed. Then came the word of the Lord unto Samuel, saying, "I'm sorry that I have set Saul up to be king, for he has turned back from following me, and has not performed my commandments." And it grieved Samuel, and he cried long into the night. And when Samuel rose early to meet Saul in the morning, it was told Samuel, saying, "Saul came to Carmel, and behold, he set him up a place, and is gone about, and passed on, and gone down to Gilgal." And Samuel came to Saul, and Saul said to him, "Blessed be thou of the Lord. I have performed the commandment of the Lord." And then we hear these infamous words that all of us recognize in verse 14. Samuel said, "What means then this bleating of sheep in mine ears, and the lowing of the oxen which I hear?" And Saul said, "They have brought them from the Amalekites. For the people spared the best of the sheep and of the oxen to sacrifice unto the Lord thy God, and the rest we have utterly destroyed." Then Samuel said to Saul, "Stay, and I will tell you what the Lord has said to me this night." And he said to him, "Go ahead and tell me." In verse 17, Samuel says this, "When you were little in your own sight, were you not made the head of the tribes of Israel, and the Lord anointed you king over Israel? And the Lord sent you on a journey and said, 'Go and utterly destroy the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they are consumed.' Why then did you not obey the voice of the Lord, but did fly upon the spoil, and did evil in the sight of the Lord?" And Saul said to Samuel, "Yes, I have obeyed the voice of the Lord, and have gone the way which the Lord sent me, and have brought Agag, the king of Amalek, and have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. But the people took of the spoil, the sheep, oxen, the chief of the things which should have been utterly destroyed, to sacrifice to the Lord in Gilgal." And Samuel said in verse 22, "Has the Lord as great a delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to listen than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you also from being king." Now, as we look at how this happens, we now see that this very, very important verse that doesn't get covered too much. Samuel said, "When you were little in your own sight, were you not made the head of the tribes of Israel?" This verse is absolutely critical, especially in our culture today, because so many of our problems stem from the fact that we think too highly of ourselves. Is it any wonder we miss the mark so often? I would implore you, beloved, to keep this verse in mind and do not forget it. Self-elevation can be very dangerous. So, moving on, in the book of Numbers, chapter 24, verse 20, we're told that the Amalekites were the very first tribe to war with Israel. And in Deuteronomy 25, verse 17 through 19, it says this, "You must never forget what the people of Amalek did to you as you came out of Egypt. Remember that they fought with you and struck down those who were faint and weary and lagging behind, with no respect or fear of God. Therefore, when the Lord your God has given you rest from all your enemies in the land that your God gives you as an inheritance to possess it, you will wipe out the name of Amalek from under heaven. Never forget this." Well, we are not through with the Amalekites at this point. Saul did not follow the command and do all that he was told to do. Now, if you would, we have to fast forward approximately 600 years to the time of Esther. This entire incident happened because Saul missed the mark and did not obey the command to wipe out all the Amalekites. So, because of that, we now have this situation developing in the book of Esther. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is going to turn out to be so relative to our day. All right. This is Esther chapter 3. After these things, did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him, and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had commanded them doing this. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did he revere him. Then the king's servants which were in the king's gate said to Mordecai, Why are you transgressing the king's commandment? And it came to pass, when they spoke daily to him, and he wouldn't listen to them, they told Haman, to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. The book of Esther is the very first time that we hear the word Jew in the Old Testament. We're now in Persia, the ancient name for Iran. And Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, has just been promoted by King Ahasuerus to virtually the second position in the land. Haman was an Edomite through Esau's son, Amalek. So now we have a tie-in from the Amalekites of Saul's day all the way 600 years later to Esther and the king and this story. As we have heard, everybody's bowing and revering Haman except Mordecai. And once finding out that Mordecai not only will not revere and bow to him, but he's a Jew, Haman develops a hatred, a burning hatred for Mordecai and the rest of the Jewish population in the entire kingdom. So let's go on. In verse 7, in the first month, that is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur, that is the lot, before Haman from day to day, from month to month, to the 12th month, that is the month of Adar. Now these months have Hebrew names. Nisan is the very first month of the Hebrew year. It is in the spring. It's kind of a divide between March, half of March and half of April. And in verse 7, pur means to cast the lot. And Haman is so incensed over Mordecai's refusal to bow down that he wants those lots cast every day for a solid year to find out which day would be the best day to annihilate everybody. Verse 8, and we'll move on. And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, There is a certain people, scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people. Neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them, or to deal with them. And 9, if it please the king, let it be written, that they may be destroyed. And he wanted it so bad, he goes on to say, I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of this business, to bring it to the king's treasuries. Now, folks, 10,000 talents of silver in that day was worth millions of dollars. And in verse king, the king took his ring from his hand, gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and it's quoted here, the Jews' enemy. In verse 12, we now look at this. Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month, or Nisan, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants and to the governors, that were over every province, and to the rulers of every people of every province, according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus was it written, and sealed with the king's ring. So on the 13th day of the first month, this is written. And in verse 13, and the letters were sent by posts into all the king's provinces to do this, to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, this day, upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. Now think about this. They would have most of the year to realize that in the 12th month of the year, they were going to be destroyed. This went to 127 Persian provinces in that area. And when it's over, the king and Haman sit down to drink and celebrate what they've done. So when we see this, we look at pure obsession, the ability to pay 10,000 talents of silver, millions of dollars, cast lots every day for the perfect day to annihilate, and on we go. This is hatred beyond description. So we're looking now at the 13th day of the 12th month. Copies go out to everybody. And we're all familiar with this story, so we know that this plot is foiled by Queen Esther. And Haman is hanged on the very gallows meant for Mordecai and tens of thousands of Jews. The tables are turned by command of the king on the 23rd day of Sivan. This is June, month of June. The command states that on the same day that Haman was going to destroy the Jews, the 13th day of the 12th month of Adar, the Jews are to destroy all their enemies in the kingdom. In Esther 9:5, it says, "Thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. And in Shushan, the palace, the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men." In verses 7 through 10, we read, Haman's 10 sons were all hanged the same day, and it lists all of their names. So the tables have been turned, all of this gets flipped around, and the Jews that day destroyed their enemies. And out of this comes a beautiful feast of Purim, the feast of the casting of lots. This came about because of the celebration of the deliverance of the Jews from total annihilation in the kingdom of Persia. This feast is celebrated exactly 1 month before the feast of Passover in the 12th month of the year. Passover being in the first month, Nisan, and Purim being 1 month before that. We have just fast-forwarded 600 years from the time of Samuel to the time of Esther. And now we're going to fast forward again to the year of 1946. Beloved, we are now at the Nuremberg trials, where the leaders of the Nazi Party were sentenced to death for their part in the slaughter of the Jewish people. On October the 16th, 1946, parallel to the hanging of Haman's 10 sons, 10 men were hanged on that date. Hermann Göring committed suicide the night before his execution with a cyanide capsule. However, there is a gentleman named Julius Streicher. He was the owner of a newspaper in Hitler's time, and he, more than any other, used that newspaper to incite violence and murder and hatred of the Jews in Germany at that moment. He mounts the steps of the gallows, and when he puts his foot on the first step, he yells out, "Heil Hitler!" And he mounts the platform, and as he walks over to where the hangman's noose is, he sneeringly cries out, "Purim, 1946," and thereafter was hung. Now, there is something here that needs to be discovered, because I'm sure you're asking, how can this possibly be related? And here it is. We are in the 9th chapter of Esther, and it reads as this, starting in verse 12. Haman has been hanged. His 10 sons are killed by the sword. In verse 12, and the king said to Esther, the Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan, the palace, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now, what is your petition? And it will be granted you. Or what is your request further? And it shall be done. Then Esther said, if it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow, also according unto this day's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows. Now, we have just read in previous verses that 500 men in the palace of Shushan were killed by the sword, and Haman's 10 sons. Now we're reading that the king has asked Esther what her request is, and now she wants to kill Haman's 10 sons. Now, kings in those days had lots of power, but you cannot kill 10 men twice. What happened? Well, here it is. If you look down in 13, the translators got this right. In verse 13, there's a word in there. It's, if you read it and overlook it, you would just say tomorrow. But the way it's written, it's to space morrow. In this case, it's not tomorrow like tomorrow will be the next day. It's tomorrow in the future. So here we have the relativity of Scripture. And we have in the future this very same thing enacted again. Haman's 10 sons in the future would be hanged. They were already killed by the sword. I don't know that Esther even knew, or the king even knew, of what they had spoke was prophetic. But it did happen. Now, when we look at this all together, this day, infamous day of 1946, was Esther's tomorrow, a time in the distant future. If only Saul had fully obeyed the command of the Lord and wiped out all the Amalekites, who knows what effect this may have had on history. We do know, in fact, what the effect was on history by not following the command and truly missing the mark. I want to look a little further at this date of October 16th, 1946 for just a moment. I briefly mentioned in my first program that there is a cadence that this world goes by. This cadence is found in the book of Leviticus, chapter 23, and it's where we're introduced to the feasts of the Lord. Leviticus 23:2 says, "Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them concerning the feasts of the Lord, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, these are my feasts. These feasts belong to the Creator and are gifted to the entire world. In the fall of the year, there's a feast called Tabernacles." Leviticus 23:3 says, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, the 15th day of this 7th month shall be the Feast of Tabernacles, and for 7 days to the Lord." So from the 15th to the 21st, this feast was celebrated. In verse 42, it says, "You shall dwell in booths 7 days. All that are Israelites born shall dwell in booths." Verse 43, "That your generations may know that I made the children of Israel to dwell in booths when I brought them out of Egypt. I am the Lord your God." Now listen carefully. The date of October 16th, 1946 corresponds to the month of Tishri, the 21st day, which is its Hebrew name. This day is called Hoshana Rabbah, and that day is the day that all judgments are closed and sealed for the coming year. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how relative something that happened back in Samuel's time. By not hitting the mark, we went through a horrible deal in Esther's time, and that same mark that Saul missed caused the tremendous slaughter in our time. Hoshana Rabbah happened on the very corresponding day of October the 16th, 1946. The day on the Jewish calendar was Tishri 21, the day when all judgment is sealed. I hope that this has been a blessing to you in a sense, to understand that when we read something in the Torah, it points to our very day. It is relative to us, meaningful to us. And that is why Yeshua, in every word he spoke, was continually pointing us back to the Torah so we would not miss the mark. Thank you very much. I hope that this has been a blessing and enlightened, and I will be with you again next week. God bless.